We're now going to jump into the second section of this lecture and talk more about insecticide spray applications. And here, the context is also just like when we talked about beet leafhoppers, is also related to an agricultural issue. In this particular case, the context is that pesticides are being sprayed excessively. And there are multiple reasons for that, and we all suffer the consequences of that. Growers are not interested in it; they are wasting money, and there are lots of environmental concerns and concerns about pesticide residue on the food we eat, consume, and on our backyards being sprayed and contaminated in all sorts of ways and water bodies. So, of course, everybody's on the same page here. We all know that pesticides are in may be necessary in some cropping systems, but we want to use them judiciously, meaning we want to only use them when and where they are needed. And in some cases, weather conditions and or the operational settings, the nozzles, the spray volume, how fast the tractor is moving, all those factors can negatively affect the outcome and therefore lead to a spray failure and or a contamination of neighboring environments. So that's something we all want to avoid. Now, how can we develop the tools? So one thing to help farmers avoid these situations, because one thing is, as a scientist or as a consumer or as a parent, to be concerned about these things happening. But it's really a responsibility of us as researchers to find solutions to this. It's not enough that we stand up and get concerned and tell growers not to use as many pesticides and use them the right way. Well, we can't do that without providing them the tools they need. So this is something that, even though I'm not a spray engineer, even though, there are many things that I'm not, I think this is very, very important because I am related to applied agriculture and I'm very interested in sustainable food production. So this is a project that we took on. How can we develop a tool that growers can use to make smarter decisions on when and where to spray their pesticides, if that is needed? Just to create a little bit of context here, I think it's important to start by looking at, why is spray coverage actually important? Why is it so important that this product that's being applied is ending up in the crop and not somewhere else? And we have performed some very, very simple experiments which sort of underscore the whole idea here. So to the left, you can see 3 cabbage leaves, and what we did, we put the 3 into a cage, but before that, one of them had been dipped in a insecticide formulation at the labeled rate that would have gone out into a field, and this was with diamondback moths. The one in the middle with the yellow sticky note had been dipped. Only half of the leaf had been dipped into the solution, and the red one, the entire leaf was dipped. So we knew that we had 0, 50, and 100% coverage. And then we released female moths into these cages and then saw where they laid their eggs. And we did experiments with 2 different strains of diamondback moths. And you can see in the graph, especially the one in the middle, when we used gamma cyhalothrin, that the both strains strongly preferred to lay eggs on the non-treated leaf. In other words, they're able to assess in some way that this leaf has been treated, and therefore they try to avoid it. Okay, it was a little bit different with Spinodoram, which was a chemical they weren't quite used to, but the strain that only had one level of resistance actually showed a similar pattern, while the one that was not that was already resistant to many other chemicals didn't really care. So there's a correlation here between how susceptible you are as an individual and when you give them a choice between sprayed and unsprayed surfaces, where they lay their eggs. And this is precisely why coverage is so important. That if we don't get good coverage, we're essentially giving the target pest a choice between treated and untreated surfaces. And that's what we want to avoid. If they have a choice, they will outsmart us, and they will preferably lay their eggs where their offspring has a higher likelihood of surviving. On the previous slide, I showed you how females shy away from treated surfaces. What we also did in the same study was we used something called EthoVision, which is a behavioral video software program that can be used to measure and quantify movement of individuals. And we looked at diamondback moth larvae, how they also shied away from treated surfaces. The idea is that you follow a larva that you put in the middle of a leaf, and you can see the red track on the left there, how it was actually moving around. So half of the leaf, using the midrib as the separation line, half of the leaf had been treated with an insecticide, Spinodoram or gamma-cyhalothrin, and the other had been treated with water. And we used sunscreen as a perimeter barrier to keep the larva inside the arena. And then we measured how much time each of the larvae stayed in those two zones, whether they was the treated or the untreated zone. And if they were equal amount of time in the two zones, we would have what is illustrated with the horizontal line there would be a 50%. But what you can see is that for both chemicals, the diamondback moth strain that was most susceptible to both chemicals actually, only about 20 or 30% of the time was spent in the treated surface. So they spent disproportionately more time in the untreated surfaces. So clearly showing that the larvae also shied away from the chemicals. So we basically illustrated that both larvae and adults are able to assess whether this leaf surface is treated with a chemical. And that's why it's so important to have good coverage when these pesticides are being sprayed, because otherwise we're giving the insects an opportunity to shy away. They will find out where to go in order to avoid the chemicals. And this is called behavioral avoidance or behavioral resistance. Returning to our field situation where we want to use pesticides and spray them with the highest likelihood of getting good spray coverage, because we've now demonstrated why that is so important. Getting canopy penetration, meaning getting the leaves far into the canopy covered, and also having good coverage consistently within that canopy. Well, we are the graph as the figure to the right. I think it represents what most people and many people think, and that is the more water we spray, the more water we use, the better coverage and better penetration we're going to get. So it's basically a linear relationship. What I'm going to show you and what we have found in our studies of this is that is definitely not the case. And what we used in this study, which was a very, very large field study, is we used what's called water sensitive spray cards. And these are these yellow cards you can see on the photo to the left. They're yellow. And then when water droplets are sprayed or deposited onto the cards, they turn blue. So you basically have this relationship between blue and yellow. And you can calculate based on coverage if you can find out how much blue you have out of all the pixels, and you can use that as an indicator of spray coverage. If you, like me, enjoy being out and around growers and in sort of real world applications, a good way to demonstrate the potency, the importance of spray coverage, and how likely it is not to get a good spray coverage is by running a simple trial here. And I am standing over here in the middle and showing to some farmers in Western Australia. We created a little field, and then we had it sprayed with a small spray rig that they had, and we placed the water sensitive spray cards at different vertical positions within the canopy. So this would be the top, this would be the middle, and this would be the bottom. And this was with a different nozzle. So in a very simple way, and images speak 1,000 words, right? So you can see this overall with this particular nozzle, the one to the right, we got very good coverage in the top of the canopy. But as we move down into the canopy, we can see we got very low coverage. And of course, when we are targeting pests with an pesticide application, they're not sitting on the top waiting to get covered or soaked in pesticide. This is not how it works. They're sitting inside the canopy, deep into it, and typically on the abaxial, on the underside of leaves, right? So this is really the coverage that we want, that we are hoping will get the job done. So by showing growers this, we are able to then convince them about the importance of this and how proper use of nozzles and how to calibrate your equipment, and also spray at the right time of the day, maybe even spraying at night, is something that they need to look into. In collaboration with strawberry growers at multiple locations in California, we set up these trials. We used their commercial spray rigs. We didn't spray chemicals. We didn't put adjuvants in because we didn't want to include that. That would have made it too big a study. But we did spray at over 3 years in multiple different locations, different varieties with different canopy sizes and different spray rigs, different speed. And because we did it, we sprayed at different times of the year. We had different weather conditions. So we had a weather station here collecting temperature, relative humidity, wind speed, and barometric pressure during all of these sprays. So water sensitive spray carts had been placed out in these fields, and we then tested different nozzles and could drive the spray rig at different speeds, and therefore get lots and lots of data. In total, we collected data from over 4,700 water sensitive spray carts. So we had, for each of those time points that those cards were sprayed, we had weather data. We knew the volume of water that was sprayed with that nozzle. We knew the tractor speed. We knew the spacing between the nozzles and how many nozzles there were across a bed, because the beds of beds in strawberry fields vary in California. And then we also knew the plant height, the spacing, and the width of the plant. So that had to do with sort of the texture and the density of the canopy that we were spraying. So we basically had 3 categories of variables. We had weather data, we had operational data, and we had plant characteristics data. And we use those 3 groups of variables to then run multi-regression analysis and see if we could use them to explain the spray coverage that we obtained on the different spray carts with the different nozzles. You may recall that a couple of slides ago I showed you a linear correlation between spray volume and spray coverage. And you can see why we're a little bit concerned about people thinking that, because this is, of course, looking more like this is actual data with commercial spray rigs. And it clearly shows you that the story is far more complex than that. That yes, there is a significant regression line when you have 4,700 points. Yes, but that line actually only explains about 10% of the variance, meaning that spray coverage, even though spray volume in itself is important, there are many other variables that are interfering here. So we need much more information, and that's why we collected operational settings in addition to spray volume. We collect weather data and also plant characteristics to get much more nuance, much more detail about what are actually the variables that are driving spray coverage. So as indicated with this little cartoon here, this guy clearly has the wrong tool, right? We need better tools to predict spray applications, what kind of coverage we're getting. Because if we don't have that, if there's a high chance of of incomplete and poor spray coverage? Well, there's a big chance that growers are going to use more pesticides. There's a higher risk of environmental contaminations. They're going to spend more time and more money and more fuel and compacting soil more because they're going to be driving more around spraying these chemicals. And there's a higher risk of developing both behavioral but also physiological resistance. So we really need much better tools. So that's why all this data that we collected, we have now taken that and developed it into, so the models, the regression models that we then developed, we have programmed them and put them into a phone app. Now, all of this talk about pesticide applications and behavioral resistance and all this was really my own segue to get to where I really wanted to get to, and that is this slide here. Because we wanted to come up with a solution that would be useful. We wanted to help growers solve this challenge of being able to spray their pesticides more smartly. But I am not a programmer. I am there. So I needed help somewhere. So I reached out to undergraduate computer science students, and two of them are sitting here with me. That's Alex and Gabriel. And they, at least back when we started, knew absolutely nothing about agriculture and never thought that their interest and knowledge about phone app development and programming could in any way be relevant to agriculture. But it turns out they could. Once I explained them the project, they got really excited, and Alex was in charge of developing the Android version and Gabriel the iPhone version. So they were working together but on two different operating systems and developing the same program. So we got them involved, and therefore now are able to offer this phone app free to everybody who wants to use it. It's available through my website, and they learned something in the process, and we were able to deliver something that otherwise was impossible because we broke down the barriers between different colleges and departments and were able to get these very bright undergraduate students involved. We also did something that I think is interesting and something you should consider yourself. Is we got in touch with a program, a website in England called Futurum Careers. And this is an opportunity to, their goal in life is to encourage high school and undergraduates, high school students especially, to get into science. So we wrote an article about computer science undergrad students and how they got involved in agriculture. So there's an outlet here that really helps promote them and also illustrate this interesting multidisciplinary research program we were able to put together, where computer science and bioengineering and hopes to develop tools so that we can use pesticides more smartly all came together in one project. If you're interested in actually using the phone app either as an Android or iPhone application, or just read more about it, we have tutorial videos on my website in the section called Smart Spray. And you can also, and then you can try it out for free and recommend it to others if you think it's useful. What we really illustrate with this phone app is that it's not only what you spray, but it's particularly how you spray it and how you can optimize that. And we think that is critically important in the responsible and correct way of using pesticides. I also want to point out that I think this is an example of us trying to go beyond publication, because of course we're going to write a publication about that. We've already published similar papers, but it's really about developing the tool that farmers can use. And there's even the possibility that somebody would take this technology and market it in some way, engage with pesticide companies and others and use this. So we really created a platform that goes far beyond the research publication. I can use the app, and I do use it in my teaching, in my lab sessions. So also now I have a gadget, a tool that I can use and therefore enrich my educational program with this. So the app itself serves many important it checks many boxes, but ultimately I think the most important part is that we're trying to give back to a community what we think is so important, and that is that the science we're doing this is leading to solutions that they can use, and the students we engage with learn skill sets that are relevant to the job market out there.